Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. The U.S. Secretary of State held talks with both Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan in Ankara over the weekend on the first leg of his latest Middle East tour. One of the main topics of Antony Blinken's visit was the sale of F-16 fighter jets, which has been stuck in Congress for more than 2 years. The meeting also comes after a Turkish parliamentary committee recently approved Sweden's NATO membership bid. But Fidan told Blinken that the final decision still needs to be passed by the Turkish parliament. Another important issue the two diplomats discussed was Israel's ongoing onslaught on Gaza, where more than 23,000 Palestinians have been killed. Fidan once again called for an immediate ceasefire. Blinken's Middle East tour comes amid a growing number of attacks in the region. Senior Hamas and Hezbollah commanders were killed in Lebanon just days apart in alleged Israeli airstrikes. Iran, which has been a staunch supporter of Hamas, was also hit by twin bombings that killed at least 100 people, raising concerns of a wider conflict. And for more on Antony Blinken's Türkiye visit, joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Michael Cox. He is a senior advisor at Global Policy Institute. And from Prague, Nilhan Acikalin. She is an associate professor at Ankara Bayram Veli University. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken is on his fourth Middle East tour since Israel-Hamas war started 3 months ago. Has anything significant come out of his meetings?
Thank you, Ayşe. Yes, as you said, that this is the fourth visit tour of the Blinken. As we remember that the previous one, basically, we can consider it as a failure to stop the conflict and having a ceasefire in a solution way. But this time could be a different, and because Blinken started his tour a few days ago in Ankara, and I think it will be this time with the rhetoric changing of the Biden, with the criticizing of the Netanyahu, and what's really happening on the field has been changed quite in past 90 days. So I'm expecting a much more positive outcome for at least a temporary ceasefire or to stop the violence for a while, to make some exchange of prisoners. But we will see what will happen. But at least this time, Blinken seems to be much more optimistic, but at the same time too cautious while they are talking with the regional leaders.
So, Sean, the war in Gaza was also on the agenda, as we've mentioned, when Blinken met with Turkish leadership. He said Türkiye is prepared to use its relationships it has with critical players in the region to help prevent the conflict to spread further. Which regional players he was referring to?
Well, the notion here in Washington is that Türkiye has good connections with Iran and to a lesser extent with Hezbollah, which are groups that have a key interest in what is happening in Gaza right now. In addition, President Erdogan is seen as a leader in the Muslim world, and his influence extends to other Muslim countries that can work together to support a potential U.S. plan to resolve the issue. The question is, what is the U.S. proposal, and will Secretary Blinken be able to sell it to both Türkiye and to other countries in the region?
So, Suay, part of his visit was to put pressure, I'm talking about Blinken's visit, on Middle Eastern countries to contain the Gaza conflict. Will he do the same with Israel, you think?
We will see. As I mentioned, since the 90 days, lots of has been changed. There are a huge number of the casualties and the martyrs from the Palestine side. And it's obvious that this time Blinken tried to find a common ground between the regional players and Israel as well. And I think, as we remember, that the Americans suggested a very limited land operation to Israel in the beginning of the land operation, and in the New Year's Eve, Israel clearly announced that they will continue to have limited land operation with the limited number of the soldiers. So it seems that Israel came to the same point what the Americans said in the beginning. So I am not expecting a very big differences in case of supporting in Israel with the military requirements and other things, but at least I am expecting somehow little bit to make pressure on the Israel to keep it limited and to focus on the more humanitarian side.
So there are reports that Israel won't allow Palestinians to return to Gaza unless all Israeli hostages are released. But Blinken was quick to offer his own take on the matter. Let's have a listen, then we'll continue to talk.
Palestinian civilians must be able to return home as soon as conditions allow. They cannot, they must not be pressed to leave Gaza. We reject the statements by some Israeli ministers and lawmakers calling for a resettlement of Palestinians outside of Gaza. These statements are irresponsible, they're inflammatory, and they only make it harder to secure a future Palestinian-led Gaza, with Hamas no longer in control.
So, Sean, are we starting to see more public disagreements between the two allies, and could that translate into more pressure on Israel to change what it has been doing in Gaza?
Well, it is definitely an interesting strategy that Secretary Blinken has taken by visiting Muslim leaders first before sitting down with Benjamin Netanyahu and his Israeli war cabinet. The idea behind this is to gauge the temperature of of the countries surrounding Israel, to see what they would likely concede to, what they would want to see as a type of resolution before he sits down with Netanyahu. And that will also help him understand how much pressure to apply to Israel. As you can well imagine, here in Washington, this is a very contentious issue. We have elected officials who represent constituencies and diaspora communities on both sides of the argument, both sides of the conflict, that are putting pressure on the government to come to a resolution that favors one side or the other. And it is a very difficult balancing act. It is a smart strategy that Blinken has taken, because now he's not going empty-handed into a meeting with Netanyahu and only listening to the Israeli side. At least he's listening to other leaders in the region as well.
So, Suay, another item on Blinken's agenda during his stay in Ankara was Sweden's membership into NATO and, of course, the sale of F-16 fighter jets to Türkiye. How has that played out? Because we know that Türkiye expects a near simultaneous approval of Sweden's NATO bid and the sale of F-16s to Ankara.
Yes, Ayşe, actually there is a huge expectations from the Sweden side from the Ankara. At least there will be just only the two level will be left for the Sweden's NATO membership. The parliamentary will take to the voting, and later president will sign it. But we can't say that there will be some very concrete time for discussing, for voting in the parliamentary. But at least it seems that especially under the phone diplomacy between the President Erdogan and the President Biden, we are expecting to see much more positive results regarding the F-16, and there will be, of course, a positive atmosphere happening between the Sweden's membership in the parliamentary session as well.
So, Shan, has it now become obvious that these two issues are linked? I mean, which side is likely to take the first step, you think? I mean, or has this become a waiting game?
I think this is more of a waiting game than having these issues linked. The fundamental difference that we see with the United States political process is that Congress is quite independent from the executive branch. Our legislature doesn't always conform to what the executive branch is doing. So any promises or any commitments that President Biden and through him Secretary Blinken might be making to foreign leaders will not necessarily be reflected in the actions of Congress. While the United States would definitely like to see Sweden in NATO, while congressional members, legislative members would like to see Sweden in NATO, they won't necessarily let that interfere with their decision on the F-16 sales.
So, Suay, what happens if Greece's request to buy F-35 fighter jets pass through the Congress before Turkey's F-16s?
Well, we saw that kind of same kind of outer weight between the Greece and Turkey from the American foreign policy in the previous history as well. I'm not expecting to have a big diplomatic crisis between America and the Turkey regarding on this issue, but of course Turkey is very clear stance on the F-16s and the positions on the going back to the F-35 program. And in this level, if the Greece will take the F-35 confirmation before the Turkey's request of 16s, of course there will be a little bit negative atmosphere, but I don't believe that it won't directly affect the whole relation.
So, Sean, how deep do differences run between Ankara and Washington when it comes to regional conflicts, fight against terrorism, and security arrangements?
Well, the United States, especially after its long engagement in Iraq and its long engagement in Afghanistan, wants to pass off responsibility for trying to manage these conflicts to regional leaders. And Türkiye is definitely seen as a regional leader. There is still, to a certain extent, an issue of trust between Ankara and Washington because they have different constituencies, they have different priorities. But if the United States sees that regional leaders such as Türkiye can get a handle on the situation in conflict in the region, then the United States is more than willing to back off as a response to the needs of their political base and the constituents here in the United States. The preference definitely is for the United States to not be considered the world's policeman any longer. At least that's the approach that the Biden administration has been taking over the last several years. They would like to see regional leaders step up and take control situation if there is confidence that they have the capacity to do so.
So, Suay, are both countries likely to walk past their differences anytime soon?
It's not easy to say, but it's obvious that Turkey has a very clear stance on the fighting against terrorism, both in the ground and the diplomacy level. I won't expect any change from the Turkey's position. And I think the coming days will be more important while especially the Iran blasts that responsibility taken by the ISIS, which is revitalizing that kind of the terrorism spirits in the region, of course, will harm the mutual relations when it comes to the divergences of both countries on terrorism issue.
All right, Suay and Sean, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.